Hello and welcome everyone. Hi, I'm Jess. I'm the Events and Program Manager for Global Game Jam. Our next partner jam kicks off this Friday in collaboration with the One World or None team. This jam aims to raise awareness about citizens' assemblies and promote a deeper understanding of this innovative model, one designed to meet the challenges of the 21st century. This is the first in our series of webinars that dive deep into the topic of citizens' assemblies and provides resources and context to the participants of the One World or None jam. Citizens Assemble, which is the jam that we are kicking off on June 6th, will run through early August. It's open to creators of all backgrounds, and the jam will have a $10,000 prize for the top game, amongst prizes for additional categories, and the potential for further development support for standout submissions. The jam will run across 2 phases, with teams creating prototypes in a 2-week phase 1, then iterating concepts based on feedback in phase 2. Final submissions will be judged on a variety of categories, including best overall, best gameplay, and citizens vote. Joining me today, along with Tristan and Jamie, is going to be Caroline, who is the lead global policy and advocacy at Democracy International, where she focuses on connecting organizations and individuals working to advance direct democracy and citizens' participation around the world. Her work involves gathering best practices globally and creating opportunities to exchange and learning among those engaged in democratic innovation. She also advocates for strengthening democratic infrastructure beyond national borders, promoting a more inclusive and participatory decision-making at the transnational level. Before they bring them on stage, please just drop any questions that you may have along the way about citizens' assemblies or the jam in the chat so that we can collect them for a live Q&A. So without further ado, let me bring everybody on stage. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Would you like me to start talking?
Yes, yeah.
Lovely to see everyone.
Yeah, if you want to start, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Thanks everyone who's come to this. My name's Jamie Kelsey. I'm the Managing Director of One World or None, and it's a real pleasure to be here. I'm just going to give you a little brief pep talk. So Jess used that really important phrase, meeting the challenges of the 21st century. That's exactly what's going down here. I have a long history of being involved in change making, and there was a stage in my life where I spent a lot of time shouting at buildings, and you get to a place where you're going, this is not going to get us anywhere where we need to be, and we need to be in certain places pretty quickly. If you're looking at all the various crises we're facing in terms of climate and ecological collapse, the rise of AI that's unbridled, serious mass conflict for the last resources. I don't think that the governance structures or the decision-making bodies that have kept humanity going along all this time, they're not up to the task. And when I got to shouting at my last building, I decided, you know, the work is really in dealing with a very specific crisis, which is just upgrading our operating systems by which we make decisions. It's really that simple. It's nothing to do with left-wing or right-wing politics or anything like that at all. It's actually pretty straightforward. There's nothing more ordinary than upgrading your operating systems when they're out of date. And so we started working in the world of deliberative democracy and participatory democracy, just different ways by which humanity comes together and makes decisions. And citizens' assemblies really strike a chord with me. And I've never worked in something where there's such an immediate switch to support something. You know, there's this penny drop moment, and you're going to have this over the course of this talk today, and I've watched it in people's faces where you're explaining how it works, and they're going, and then they eventually go, no way. It's fantastic, because it's just common sense. Yeah. You know, humanity, ordinary, regular people. Yeah, we are extraordinary. And in fact, we're all pretty much on the same page. We all pretty much want the same world. You know, when people who aren't being listened to are finally being listened to, they're brilliant. When we're able to listen to each other and come to decisions together, we're exquisite. It's a no-brainer. And so, making this game is really important to us. Obviously, games reach so many people, and there's so much in Citizens Assemblies to really enjoy and celebrate. It's really rich experience. I guess there's two highlights that I'll give you, and then I'm going to hand over to my friend Caroline. Do you know these are anti-polarization machines? Can you believe that? What's happening is when they're really well facilitated, and you'll find out much more, but the people who are brought to assemblies, they're chosen like jury service. It's random. And so all kinds of backgrounds are there. It's random, but it's representative. So according to ethnicity and age, gender, economic background, geography, it's a pretty accurate snapshot. So you're going to have people in there who are absolutely opposite ends on an opinion, at loggerheads. And you've had people coming in and they recount their experiences and they're going, when I met her, I just wanted to, take her out the back and shout at her, or that fellow, I just had to grab him. And then by the end, I've seen it so many times, and Caroline and people who are practitioners, where it ends in tears. I got you so wrong, man. This is happening. This is happening in all these assemblies. It's a beautiful thing. And the other thing is this: we're in an age in the 21st century where misinformation travels 4 times more quickly and reaches 6 times more people than information. And assemblies can become an oasis of credible, reliable, unbiased information in an infinite desert of misinformation, confusion, propaganda, and lies. And those are just 2 of the aspects that I think games can really, really celebrate. So with that in mind, pep talk over. And thanks for coming. And we're really looking forward to all your work. But I'm going to pass over to my friend and colleague, Caroline Verneyen from Democracy International, who's going to give you a much clearer picture of how the hell these work. Over to you, my friend. If you take
thank you. Yeah, I just found the unmute button. Thank you so much for that introduction, and I really hope that I can answer your questions and provide this clear view on citizens assemblies. So citizens assemblies, I want to start by saying that you may have heard of them because they really are all the rage in recent years. We're going through what has been called the deliberative wave by democracy practitioners such as myself. So where we're really starting to look at all of these tools that help people connect and deliberate with each other more than just everybody in their own private voting booth and passing a vote to somebody who's going to decide for them. But citizens assemblies are nothing new. It actually goes all the way back to ancient Greece. So it is something that is thousands of years old. And we are just going through the most recent iteration of it, which is very exciting. So I have the difficult task of explaining to you what they are. And at the same time, there are so many different citizens assemblies happening at the moment that all of them are a little bit different. So I'll try to give a little bit of sort of the essentials, and then like maybe different models that exist out there. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have in the Q&A. My voice is a bit croaky, and I hope I make it through this talk. I have a bit of a cold, so I hope I can make it through without going into a coughing fit, but I might have to chew it out for a little bit. So Jamie has mentioned already the most important things. So what are citizens assemblies? They are decision-making tools or deliberation tools for citizens that are based on principles of random selection that incorporate a learning phase, sustained deliberation, and that the outcome of a citizens assembly is usually that citizens hand over recommendation to policymakers, so to parliamentarians, to the government, or to the citizens, to the entire population themselves. And so I'll try to explain all of these different phases a little more in detail now. So the random selection principle, I think, is really the core of citizens assembly. That's really the most important point, because it is about representation. The goal is to get a snapshot of the entire population, but also to ensure that everybody has an equal, fair chance to participate. So it really is like a lottery or like jury duty. where people are basically picked at random from the population register and called up or sent a letter and asked to participate in this exotic process that is a citizens assembly. And as you can imagine, this is often the first hiccup in the process, because a lot of people are so accustomed to getting spam or phishing or things like this that actually citizens assembly recruiters often have difficulties convincing people that this is a real process that they should take part in and that they should take seriously. But they usually manage quite well, and they then build a pool of people who would be willing to participate in a citizens assembly. And from that pool, they will then select the final members in a way that they are representative of the entire population. So if a country, saying if we're talking about the national level, if the country has 51% women and 49% men, then the Citizens Assembly will reflect that. It will reflect the age levels of the general population. It will look at socioeconomic factors. Sometimes it looks at migration background, and really any combination is imaginable depending on the topic of the Citizens Assembly. It can also be that, for example, there was a global Citizens Assembly on climate change. Then they asked participants whether or not they believed in climate change, to make sure that also climate skeptics were represented. So to make really sure that you have the broad spectrum of all of humanity to come together and to deliberate. Right, then it goes into a second phase. So then in the end, you will end up with 100 or 200 or 300 members of a citizens assembly who have been randomly selected, who are demographically representative of the entire population, and who will be put together really for a prolonged, sustained amount of time to deliberate on a certain topic. So of course, a citizens assembly is always on a concrete issue. So we'll never have a citizens assembly about all of the constitution, although actually, sorry, no, I'll take that back. Those have happened, but usually it will be on well, climate, for example, has been a very good topic for citizens assemblies, and we'll get to the reasons why later. Or changing a specific part of the law, mobility. Abortion regulation has been a topic of citizens assemblies. So it can really be anything and everything, but the topic has to be, of course, very described. And then usually there will be a committee that has picked experts that will come in and that will teach these participants sort of the basics, or where the science is at, and make sure that they have a very good knowledge basis from which to start their deliberation from. So to make sure that, as Jamie says, people don't come in with ideas that are based on misinformation, or yeah, of course, to make sure that everybody is on the same level, so that there can be a fair and even discussion. They will really meet for sometimes weeks, months on end, every weekend, multiple hours, and of course, as you can imagine, this is a very difficult thing to ask of people. So often participants will also be compensated for taking part, for their time, because they might have to miss work, they might have to provide childcare. So to make sure that really people who have less access to childcare, who don't have a job where they can just call it, like say that they're not going to be there for a couple of days, that those people can also participate. Because of course the idea behind it is always that people represent the society as a whole, and that we want to do everything we can not to also by accident exclude people on any sort of factor that might then influence what the results are going to be. Yes, as I said, experts are there. They to really help people also understand everything. Sometimes citizens can also request their own experts. It can be that they feel like they haven't heard enough on a certain topic. For example, climate change is a very vast topic. It can be that they say, yeah, but we really want to know more about transportation, and we don't have an expert here, so we'd like to request one. And then this is also usually accommodated. There are usually also professional moderators there that make sure that that everybody participates really equally in the discussion. I'm sure everybody knows this from any group discussion you've had with friends or in a bar or at the dinner table. You have people who are more dominant in discussion and people who tend to like sit back and listen to other people. And so moderators are really there to make sure that also the people who tend to sit back contribute to the conversation and get asked what their opinion is, and at the same time that people that tend to be rather dominant maybe get motivated to sit around out every once in a while. So really we try to make that all of the conditions are there for really a good debate that is going to be constructive, that is going to be respectful, and that is going to lead somewhere, right? And so, yes, where does a Citizens Assembly lead? So the goal of a Citizens Assembly is that the participants come up with policy recommendations that are really concrete and specific. So it's almost, they will almost be writing legislation, right? So they, for example, in a climate example, there was a Citizens Assembly in France. They said we should ban all flights that are under 2 hours. Like there should be train connections instead. So that is a very concrete, actionable recommendation that you can give to Parliament, and they can implement it. And this is the second part there. The citizens assemblies themselves usually don't implement the decisions. They don't make the decisions. The idea behind this is that while yes, they are representative of society in like a demographic way on like the larger scale, and like when we think of like, you know, how is the population put together, they weren't elected and therefore they can't be held accountable. So they can't also not be elected next time if they did something wrong, which means that they hand recommendations to the people who were elected and who can be held accountable, which is usually the Parliament. And then the Parliament will often discuss on this and then hopefully implement the recommendations that come from a Citizens Assembly. How that connection is between Parliament and the Citizens Assembly differs from case to case, but in sort of the ideal case, it's really a process that has been in step with the decision makers from the beginning. So where the Parliament has actually asked for the Citizens Assembly, and is really willing to also work with the people from the Citizens Assembly to then put those recommendations in place. Why is that important? That's Jamie said it as well. Sorry. Citizens Assemblies are anti-polarization machines. And so you can wonder what would motivate a parliament to want to like initiate a citizens assembly or a city government or something like this. There are topics that are sometimes just too difficult for politicians to touch. They are polarizing. They are politically toxic. They are just something that, if you would do them as a political party, as a politician, you would probably rally all of your opposition against you, all of the other parties against you. But as normal everyday citizens, the participants of citizens assemblies, they don't have to represent anybody. They don't have to think about their are these people still going to vote for me if I say that blasphemy should be decriminalized, and so therefore they can speak their minds. They speak based on their they come to it not as experts but from their everyday experiences, which makes that you have a much more matter-of-fact discussion about things in a way that you just cannot have on a representative level with people who have to get reelected, right? And this might sound a little bit vague, so I try to come up, or I try to bring a good example. So in 2018, there actually I think the Citizens Assembly was the year before. There was a Citizens Assembly in Ireland on the decriminalization of abortion. So abortion had been in the Constitution since the 50s, if I'm not wrong. So it was really illegal as per the Irish Constitution to have an abortion, which meant that many Irish women ended up traveling to the UK to get an abortion. And really the whole debate also kickstarted after a woman died having a miscarriage basically, and health practitioners were unable to help her or reluctant to help her because they thought it would constitute an abortion. So at that point in time, in Ireland, a lot of people were thinking, we've had enough of this. There must be a better way to organize this. But Ireland, of course, is a very, very religious country, and the discussion around abortion is very polarized. It's very difficult, and so it was something that political parties didn't want to go near with a 10-foot pole. So they had a Citizens Assembly on it, and the Citizens Assembly, really succeeded in normalizing the discussion about it, and in showing how many people actually had personal experiences with abortion, not themselves, but not necessarily themselves, but their partners, their family, and also unnecessarily negative experiences, right? Also because a lot of abortions are for healthcare reasons. So having that debate on that level by everyday people made that it was possible for the entire population to change their mind on that. So they made recommendations on what should it should not be in the Constitution. What should the ideal term be? How should we organize healthcare around it? Handed that over to Parliament. And in Ireland, it is so that if you want to change the Constitution, you have to have a referendum on it. So the Parliament handed it back to the entire population. And there really was a months-long campaign on both sides, but British people ended up voting to implement the recommendations of the Citizens Assembly, and to take abortion out of the Constitution in Ireland. So this is something that I think would never have happened without a Citizens Assembly. And this is just one example. And so I think this is also, I can stop sharing the slides maybe, because this is the end of my presentation. So at the end, what Citizens Assemblies do is they put people in the best possible place to have a real discussion with each other, which is something that is so rare in the world that we live in, where everything is online and fast information and just writing things on social media, but to have a real face-to-face long discussion about a complicated topic, and to accept that different people may think differently from you, and to still try to come up with a compromise. And this is really something magical that happens in Citizens Assemblies. It really succeeds at bringing these people back together and seeing each other and hearing each other and trying to understand the other person's point of view and coming up with something that will work for the most amount of people. And this, in my view, is really what democracy is all about. It's why we should have more Citizens Assemblies, and why I'm also looking really forward to see how we can make the idea of Citizens Assemblies more known. And I'm just really looking forward also to your questions and to your ideas. And I'm going to round it off there.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. I really appreciate it. Jamie, Tristan, do you guys want to come back on? Tristan, I think you wanted to just talk about the jam a little bit, and then we can get into a bit of a discussion about and answer any questions that we have.
Sounds good. I have so many questions. I'll wait my turn. Hi everyone. I'm Tristan. For those who don't know, I've been helping to organize the jam. I've been a game designer for 20 years. I mean, I've been making games since I was 7, but professionally for about 20 years now. And I've known Jamie for 2 or 3 years now. And as you know, why a game jam? I mean, I've been largely for the past decade and change in mobile gaming of various kinds. And if there's one thing that teaches you as a designer, it's about accessibility and it's about reach. So I've seen firsthand games that just get out to so many millions of people, and millions of people who would never ever call themselves a gamer, but are actually more hardcore than I will ever be. And I've seen reach, and then I've seen how you compare that with emotional depth. I believe it's possible to get mass appeal, but actually inject a lot of depth into something at the same time. And so for me, it's a no-brainer. When you come come to something like assemblies, and when you start to believe that issues from climate crisis to inequality, cost of living, all these sort of things happening, I very much agree with Jamie's take that actually we need to go more systemic. And once you start thinking that, and you start seeing, okay, to Carolyn's point, we've got examples, we've got evidence of how assemblies have evolved, and how all the successful ones have gone, but also ones which haven't resulted in anything, which are just as interesting. You've got 20 odd years of a body of work of something, but at the same time, no one knows about them, which isn't not no one, but not enough people. And when you pair that with what games can do as something that can spread, and games as a space, games are play spaces, right? We can actually play within fun versions that evoke assemblies. It just felt like a no-brainer. And so why a game jam, it was down to the idea that, oh no, I'm not smart enough to come up with the best idea for a jam on my own. It'd be really wonderful if many other people could come along and help. And so ultimately the goal of the jam, and why we're so keen on further development, is to actually come up with, or arrive at a single idea, a group of ideas, whatever, and help push them forward. Because ultimately we want to arrive at the whole world, as much of the world as possible, not just knowing about assemblies, but advocating for them as well. That's the only way that you can actually get change to happen.
Brilliant.
Now what?
Yeah, I mean, games definitely are like the more universal language, or at least it's really rising to be the more universal language, because it's activates your brain in different ways, and it's a bit easier to share a game than it is to share like a movie that somebody's watched, because they're more likely to just download an app if you tell them to get a game that they really enjoyed versus sitting down for like an hour and a half movie. So being able to create a game that conveys and sends the message about citizens assemblies can honestly, hopefully, be the most powerful tool that we have to use in our back pocket.
Right on.
I love that you just said activates your brain in a different way, because that's how I feel about Citizens Assembly. Like they activate your brain in a different way, like to participate in a democracy rather than to be like a consumer of it.
Yeah, it's not an opportunity that a lot of people really get to experience. I mean, it's so common for people to go into conversations not really ever wanting to hear somebody else's opinion. They just wait until their turn to talk, and then they just say how they think, and they don't always, I mean, that's not every situation, of course. It depends on who you are having these dialogues with, but being in this kind of like space where you can be a bit more vulnerable and explore, I think can really help to change people's outlooks, maybe not necessarily your opinion, but I think these days people, I mean, especially with the internet, it's so easy for people to be keyboard warriors and just strike up arguments and never really listen to the other side. And this is such a great opportunity for people to hopefully take advantage of that when they participate.
Yeah, and it's another reason why a game jam, if I have one problem with assemblies, it's that most of us can't go do them ourselves, right? I feel lucky enough to have gotten a small taster of it thanks to a great amount of effort that, say, Jamie put into organizing a sort of small sample of one. And that's the opportunity and the challenge of the game jam, is that if we can get just a bit of that, of exactly what you said, Jess, of like you confront yourself about something when you have a different kind of conversation with someone, be they a real person or an NPC. Great. Then we get the feeling to more people than before.
And I think also just in a way, game jams just by nature are little citizens assemblies, right? Because especially if you're working with people for the first time, I mean, a lot of people come into game jams with teams that they've been working with for a while, but if you're just doing a random matchup, it's a lot of random minds coming together to create something in a very short amount of time. So it's a very organic way for us to be exploring the topic, and it makes it almost more organic what's going to come out of this game jam too. So it's just, it's a very innovative idea. I know you all have a lot of other resources on the One World or None page, which I will share in the chat. For example, you guys have the comic that's been created as well.
That's the world's first ever comic strip explainer of Citizens Assemblies, and it's from the point of view of a really cynical person. You can't tell if it's a man or a woman all the time through the story, but they start off hating the world and thinking this is a load of rubbish, and then by the end of their experience they're going, oh, actually, you know, I was wrong about this. And that whole, you used a really important word, Jess. I just want to kind of pick up on your word vulnerability. So what happens in assemblies is extraordinary, because there's magicians in there, and Tris and I and others are creating quite a lot of resources for you, and we've identified the cast, and the facilitators are like magicians or wizards, because they're able to allow people to feel safe to talk, to make sure no voices dominate. And that's actually a huge shift in the way that we communicate, because it's quite unusual. And my experience over and over again when I do assemblies, because I've been in a lot of assemblies, people's assemblies, so they're ones where people can just come together. You're not chosen through random. Every time I learn the same lesson. I know nothing. But if I really am open and listen to everyone else, every time I go away, oh my God, I was so wrong about that, or oh, now I understand, you know. And the powerful characters for me are those who have no agency. When they realize they're being listened to, when they find their agency, I guarantee, folks, they're the bomb. They'll change everything. And we can open up on this with games like this. Anyway, over to you, Jess. You're handling us beautifully. I think it's Q&A or something, right?
I do have a few questions. They're a bit more logistical, so they're a little bit less about the actual citizens' assemblies, but they're also very important questions to answer. The first question is, does it have to be teams enrolling in the game jam, or are solo devs allowed to participate? Solo devs are allowed to participate. We do on our Discord for Global Game Jam have a section for you to reach out to people or post if you are looking to join a team. So that is also an option. In just a moment, I will also drop the link to the Global Game Jam Discord if you're not already in it. And all of these links will also be in the description after this webinar is completed, so you can access them all there. Just another Discord question was that one of the people in the Discord chat was asking if they started a game in another jam. So this is a question I think Tristan can probably help answer. Are we allowed to continue it in this jam, or do all creations have to be new? They currently have a project that they want to continue that fits this concept perfectly.
We just want the best ideas. Like, that's the overriding goal of this jam, so do it.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll respond in Discord as well, but just to sum that up, if you already have an idea that you're working on that fits, we really encourage you to continue working on it and submit it in the competition. And Caroline, it was pointed out that there's in the website, their resources page needs a few more resources. So they want to know what resources your group uses for the assemblies. And if you have any links that you would be able to share, would be also fantastic for people to dive a bit more into this. And Caroline's put that in the chat, and I will send that as well to, oh, that's cool. I didn't know I could do that, but that's the website. For anybody who's, I'll drop that link as well. I didn't realize I could just put that on the screen like that, but that's fantastic. Awesome. So another question that we have in the chat, Marco asks, can we make a game regardless of political ideology, obviously caring of being kind with all people?
Caroline.
I mean, yes, I think that is the goal, right? That is the goal of a Citizens Assembly, right? So that people are not ideological. People, I think if you think of people as like political, ideological people, we start thinking of people in different boxes. But that's not how we work. Everybody wants their family to be healthy and happy, to live a life with with the people they care about, where everybody's doing relatively relatively well. So that is the goal of Citizens Assemblies, and that should be the goal of this game. So to make it free of ideology, but to translate somehow this feeling that you have of being of meeting other people and exchanging ideas and coming up with something better, like this like a game, like a game jam. So we're better when we combine our thoughts.
Definitely. So another question. Zayad asks, have you played any games that you feel already capture the spirit or part of the spirit of a Citizens Assembly? Is there anything that you have already seen that has maybe even a taste of it? I know that's the point of this, is to have the creation of the spirit of this, but just, is there anything that maybe is a little inspirational, or are we starting completely fresh with this game jam?
Nothing direct, and that might just be my own failure as a game player, right? But I come up blank a little bit when we talk about these things. Some possible interesting learnings are around games like, I don't know, it's tricky because I don't want to just invoke the opportunities and challenges of like big old MMOs, even ones based more around kindness like Sky, or I don't know. It's tricky for me, and this is why my head hurts as a game designer. It's because I'm actually going like, what is out there?
But that's also a good answer, right? That's
that?
kind of the perfect answer, because if you can't think of anything right off the top of your head, then that means that it's an area that really has so much opportunity to explore.
I'd say that's one of the reasons it does my head in, is because as a game designer, I've been trained for 20 years to make games based around personal power fantasies, right? And that's where you are the player. And even if whether you're in a multiplayer environment or a single player environment, we as developers and designers have tried for so long to make you feel great, to give you dopamine hits. To go to a place of compromise where your viewpoint might not be the quote unquote winning thing, what happens then? It kind of disrupts the entire sort of ways in which we've been taught to design games. And then if you give me a beer, I'll then go into sort of the neoliberal structures and overly individualistic structures that we have and have absorbed as game makers, right? But it's less important than the idea that, I don't know, what else is there out there that gets you to compromise while still having fun? So, don't know. It feels wide open. I don't know of much that's done this before in our industry. So that makes it super intimidating, but also quite creatively fun.
It's like I have all these ideas, but I don't want to put them out there because I don't want anyone to take them. Not like I'm not going to be able to implement any of them, but just I don't know, just different mechanics at least that I'm thinking of that could be really interesting in a way.
I'd love actually a couple of questions for Carolyn on sort of, which might be a good segue, is we looked into the roles when we started learning about the different roles in an assembly. There are the citizens, and that'd be the natural idea, is like, oh, I play as a citizen, which is absolutely a valid thing. But I'd love, Carolyn, if you could go over who are the cast of characters in an assembly, who help runs the show or whatever else is happening, because it might give ideas as well of going, well, because at the end of the day, depending on the kind of game idea you have, us as designers and whoever might be going, what's the win condition? What's the player striving for? And different roles might help us sort of see things from different angles.
Yeah, sure. So you would have a commissioning, maybe if we think of it like in time frame, you would have like a commissioning authority that would often be the parliament, but it could be the government, it could be civil society. So whoever had the idea of having a citizens assembly and what that citizens assembly should be on. So I would say that is very important. Not usually one person, hopefully, but set of characters. Then during the process itself, you have usually there's a knowledge committee or an ethics committee or both. So those are the people who will be shaping the process. So who decide who are the experts that we're going to invite to the Citizens Assembly? What are the specific topics of each session of discussion, right? Because you can't just put 100 people in a room and say, no, let's talk about climate change. No, it's like, okay, today we're going to talk about mobility. Tomorrow we're going to talk about housing. So it's you need to, so you have somebody who decides what that structure is and who should come presenting during that structure. I saw there was a question here about this demographic representativeness. So that is also something that is usually so on like the question. Sorry, just to recap, the question is what other categories of demographic representatives might there be? So like common ones are age and gender, socioeconomic factors like educational background, and then it really depends on what the Citizens Assembly is about and what can be useful, right? So with climate assemblies, often they look at the rural-urban divide, so they will have people who are from the cities and people who are from the countrysides. It can be anything imaginable, but of course it has to make sense. Like the idea behind it has to be that we want everybody around the table. We want to make sure that we don't leave anybody out. And so the people who decide that is usually also like an ethical committee or a knowledge committee who are thinking of this, right? Like, so who are the stakeholders in this particular debate? When we talk about education, maybe we want parents and teachers, so there will be a committee that decides what those demographic axes are that should be looked at. And then if you go in the Citizens Assembly itself, I think I explained that. So there you have the participants of the Citizens Assembly who are vastly different from one another, right, in terms of all of the categories we just discussed. You will have moderators who help them guide their discussions. You will have experts who present things. You will have, in some Citizens Assemblies, you have political representatives who come to either take part in discussions or listen to the discussions. In the Irish Citizens Assembly, I think there were some members of Parliament who were there to also take part in the process. So. And that brings us then, I guess, to the last part, where the recommendations of the Citizens Assembly go back to the commissioning authority. It will often be the Parliament, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the Parliament. It can be the government. So whoever has requested that a Citizens Assembly takes place. I'd say those are the main players. I don't know if I left anyone out. And then, of course, in the end, there's all of us, right? There's the entire population. That who also somehow have to. The idea of a Citizens Assembly is that it doesn't just stay in those walls where those participants are discussing to each other who are randomly selected, but also that everybody else hears about it, right? So through the media, through websites, a lot of Citizens Assemblies have online platforms where you can, as a citizen who hasn't been selected, like give your inputs or ask questions or so. And in the end, we will benefit or not benefit from the recommendations that come out of the Citizens Assembly. So I would say like all of us are also a stakeholder.
I actually have another question from Dan that's relevant to this role conversation. They ask, how are the moderators trained and the experts selected? It seems that could have almost an oversized impact on the outcome.
Of course, yeah, it is super important, and that's why, like I said, Citizens Assemblies are usually set up with a knowledge committee who are really in charge of identifying the different the different stakeholders and really to look at it from as many different points of view, looking for leading experts in the field. Usually there's also some sort of appeal process in place. So like the participants of the assembly can also say, like, we don't think that this person should be an expert, or we would like an additional expert to come and explain something. So I think the safeguard lies in the fact that there are so many actors involved in bringing that together. So if you want your Citizens Assembly to work, you're gonna want to not be, you're gonna not want anybody to be able to say that that you didn't have the entire spectrum of experts there. So yeah, it's really just by having as many different people look at it as possible. There are examples in Eastern Belgium. I'm from Belgium. Eastern Belgium is a very tiny part of Belgium where people speak German that not a lot of people know exists. But they have a permanent Citizens Assembly, meaning that it is always there. They always have, like, a sort of third chamber of parliament. So they have their normal parliament, they have their government, and then they have a Citizens Assembly that is always discussing on something. And what they're discussing on is decided by another commission of randomly selected citizens. And they decide who the experts are going to be. So there, the system was just put in place and then just handed over to the citizens entirely. And they get to decide what they will talk about, who the experts will be. Then not those people, but others randomly selected citizens will come up with policy recommendation, and then they will evaluate whether or not they think the parliament and the government did a good job at implementing it. So by putting as much as possible into the citizens' hands, it becomes also as neutral as possible. Yeah, and like, how are the moderators trained? I think there's really a lot of expertise around that, and I'm definitely not the expert to tell you, but just like there are professional moderators, right? Professional mediators who are just really focused on making sure that everybody is heard in a conversation and that the conversation is respectful, and that they don't influence the conversation in any way. So those are really the three main principles for moderators of Citizens Assemblies, and then that's how they're trained.
Can I just add a little bit? This is really, your input is fantastic, Caroline. I'm imagining being somebody who's never heard them before, and the pennies long dropped, and I go, wow, they thought about it so much. But one of the things that occurs to me when you're describing the situation with the permanent one in East Belgium, right, is this is power. So we're in a situation at the moment where power is totally concentrated, and that's very problematic. It doesn't matter what your political ideology is, that's a problem, right? I mean, it's concentrated in a handful of a couple of people. And what we're talking about is really not concentrated. You know, the idea of it being spread, the responsibilities of spread, is a really important part of this, right? It's been thought through so carefully. And in terms of the moderators or the facilitators, I ran a session yesterday with someone who's like the leading expert in the UK on something called restorative practice or restorative justice. And it just blew all our heads, because what it is you realize, as Caroline said, you know, as a facilitator or moderator, you know, you're very neutral, but that's base one. But more than that, you have this ability to be a container. This is the language she used. She makes a conversation in a way where you just create the container where everyone is extremely safe to speak. And it's such a precise art. And that's why so many assembly members who I've worked with, they always use the word magic. They're going, oh my God, the facilitators, they're like magic. But it really is an extraordinary skill. And on who chooses the experts, I was one of the 3 founders of the world's only global Citizens Assembly, which I could talk about for hours because I won't. But what I want to point out is there was, exactly as Caroline's saying, there was this overarching governance group. And then there was the knowledge and wisdom group who chose the experts, or people who use the language, commentators. Look at what we had, right? We had people from the oil industry, right, in Nigeria. So obviously they're going, well, we know it's causing a problem, but what are you going to do? Take our economy away? So they were really talking about, how do you make a just transition? But you also had what people call Westerners call indigenous wisdom keepers. So you had people who are carrying pre-colonial wisdom from around the world and expressing their opinions, as well as your climate scientists, as well as people who are coming from the just transition world, etc. It was a wide span. So the idea is, if you pull the curtain back, you can still see this. This isn't fixed in any way. This is why this is so attractive to the public when they hear about it. Anyway, that's me.
I'll just plug something coming up, which we're working hard on behind the scenes, which is a assembly explainer that tries to go a level deeper, speaking to the cast of characters Callum just talked to us about, and going through all these stages in more depth. So hopefully that's ready in the next few days for everyone to absorb as well.
Just want to quickly say, these are really good questions, folks, by the way. Keep asking them. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, I mean, they've been they really have been fantastic. Thank you again to everybody who's been watching live, as well as anybody who's watching after this is on all of our channels. I mean, this has just been a really wonderful conversation to just dive a bit deeper into citizens assemblies, because I mean, I'm coming from a game jam background, so I know a fair amount about game jams, but to have this be so eye-opening and being able to learn about this really revolutionary concept, it kind of, I'm like, this just makes more sense, and it is a bit disheartening that it's not as easily implemented as we want it to be, because it could be, I mean, it can be, but there's just, in certain places, obviously, there's going to be a lot more barriers and people resisting to these kinds of changes. What would you recommend for somebody who, they feel like they can't make a lot of these changes on their own, but they're really passionate about it? Where do you think they could start causing these actions in maybe their local environment or wherever they are, without feeling like they're getting, squashed on or not listened to?
That's a really important question, and it's one that
in 5 minutes. Go.
I'll do it in less than 5 minutes. There's no center for this movement, and I think that's quite healthy. There are a whole load of amazing organizations that you all need to tune into, like Democracy International, Sortition Foundation, ISWE, Participedia. There's loads, right? And it's not hard to find them. And you can come to our website, One World or None. But in the future, I'm sure what's going to happen is that people are going to start to do these practices in their communities. So we call them community assemblies, because it's going to become necessary for people to come together and learn how to listen to each other and solve problems together. And so there are toolkits out there for you to be doing these practices. But also in the long run, this is a pop culture movement. This is why we're doing a mobile game. This is why we're doing a feature film. This is why we're doing shorts, reels, a reality TV show. One World or None is doing the whole lot. And so the idea is really, if you popularize this enough, not like just make them popular, make people absolutely desire them. Just like when Harry met Sally, I'll have what she's having. That's the target. Then it's impossible to ignore. And my experience with the politicians that I've worked with is they're saying thank you. There are such important decisions that need to be made, and politicians are trapped. They'll lose all their electorate. Why do you think that in Ireland they did abortion and same-sex marriage? Both had their laws changed. But if you're a politician and you had an opinion about either of those, your career's over. Okay? And there are going to be a lot of very big decisions that need to be made. If the politicians, the power holders, know there is a huge uptake in ordinary people across the board calling for these and loving these, then it's going to be a safer decision for politicians to take them really seriously. So shout about it, call about it, learn about it. There's loads of materials out there, but the One World or None group, they're the first ones who are bringing this into your lives through popular culture, which is why it makes it very exciting to be sitting here talking with you all.
That actually makes such a good point, that it's not like politicians can use it as like a finger pointing, but there's just so much misrepresentation of what people's actual beliefs are, because at least in some places it's a bit doesn't feel like it's as fair of a system as it probably could be. And if politicians, regardless of where they stand on the political spectrum, they really could actually listen to their constituents in such a more productive way and be able to make decisions. Like, it makes so much more sense. I mean, it's, it's crazy that we have, like, I'm originally from the States, like we have jury duty, which kind of sounds like this, but obviously it's a completely different process. But that seems to work. So why wouldn't this also seem to work?
That's really
important.
It
clearly works, but it's like, why haven't we moved in this direction?
Yeah, that's a great link to make. I mean, we all absolutely trust juries to decide whether someone should be put in prison for the rest of their lives or not.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Brilliant.
Well, we are coming down to the end of the hour. And I've put the links for the Itch page for the Jam, as well as the One World or None webpage. Carolyn, thank you so much for spending this time with us, sharing that presentation. I know the three of us got a lot out of it. I'm sure everybody who's watching this is going to get a lot out of it. You've made this topic very digestible, and I think it's been able to, at least in me, spark ideas of how I could really make a game that takes these morsels, not necessarily just making a game that looks exactly like this, but just make it fun. And mostly I'm thinking about what kind of game my mom would play. And that's I feel like what would be driving me, because I think that makes it, transgenerational, and I'm a gamer and she's not necessarily a gamer, so it would really like broach both ends of the spectrum. So yeah, I mean, any last words?
Well, just the next steps, just in 3 days we're launching at Southwest London. I don't remember if it's live streamed or whether it's just recorded, and we'll put up the recording straight afterwards. Is that right?
It's not live streamed. It's going to be filmed, and then we're given the film, so then it will take us a little bit to just put it all together.
Yep.
But we will be able to put out a film of that event. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, we'll do it as soon as we can. I'll myself and another game designer will go through in a bit more detail, sort of some, fragments of ideas or different ways of looking at assemblies as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, but also like to echo Jess and thank Caroline so much for taking the time to go through.
Of course.
Thank you all. I'm looking so much forward to seeing what comes out of this. This is such an amazing initiative.
Yeah. We agree. And if you enjoyed this webinar, which I hope you did, we do have a couple more that's going to be coming up. We have one on June 18th, and then we'll have another one on July 16th with some experts as well. So stay tuned for those announcements. And yeah, this is us signing off. Thank you guys so much. And hope to see everybody taking part in this jam. All right. Take care.
See you soon.